Hi everyone, welcome back to the Football Tribe YouTube channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Thank you to all our new subscribers. Thank you to you all that are dedicating your time to watch our content. I hope you've had a wonderful week. It's been a great week in terms of sporting, in terms of football and all those things. There is, of course, the Diamond League is going on in that world of athletics, but back in the world of football, we did get to see the PFA Player of the Year, Phil Foden, well deserved. That was announced this week. Cole Palmer voted the PFA Young Player of the Year, well deserved. I mean, no doubts about that. On my side, we did get to see the PFA Team of the Year, of course, the likes of Rodri in there, Phil Foden, brought Erling Haaland, Arsenal going on to have Gabriel Magalhaes in there, William Saliba, David Raya, among others. So, it's been a wonderful week in terms of sport. We did get to see Chelsea beat up against Servette in the UEFA Conference League qualifications round there by 2-0. Christopher Nkunku scoring a penalty in that particular game, while Noni Madueke was the other on target for Enzo Maresca's side, who had Philip Jørgensen have his debut for the Blues. Pedro Neto did start in that particular game, but it's all good. It's all good. Now the build-up is all gearing up to the weekend ahead of match day 2 of the Premier League. We'll be looking at those fixtures that will be coming your way on match day 2, but not all of them in detail. Of course, we'll have a select few features because of bandwidth. I do not think I would be doing ourselves service if we dive right into all the games, all the 10 games that will be coming your way. But before we even get to nitpick on any of them, here is the lineup of fixtures that will be coming your way based on East African time, as that's the region where we are based. At 2:30 p.m., Brighton will be at the Amex Stadium to welcome Manchester United, while at 5 p.m., Crystal Palace will be against West Ham in that London derby. Fulham will be at home against newcomers Leicester City, while Manchester City at the Etihad Stadium, after welcoming back the return of their former captain in Ilkay Gundogan from Barcelona, will host Ipswich Town. What an addition to that team, to Pep Guardiola's side. Southampton, still at 5 p.m., will be at home against Nottingham Forest, while Tottenham Hotspurs, who will be without the services of their summer recruit in Dominic Solanke due to an ankle injury, will host Sean Dyche's Everton. And at 7:30 p.m., Aston Villa will host Arsenal at the Villa Park. And on Super Sunday at 4 p.m., Bournemouth will be up against Newcastle, while Wolverhampton Wanderers will host Chelsea, with the other game being between Liverpool and Brentford at 6:30 p.m. So that's the run of fixtures that are going to be coming your way. But as far as nitpicking goes, we'll be looking in depth that game between the early kickoff between Brighton and Hove Albion against Manchester United, as well as that game that we somehow cannot resist because both teams finished up in the top 4, and that is Aston Villa versus Arsenal. Big games. Kicking off things at the Amex Stadium, these two sides have met 14 times. In the Premier League, Manchester United has won that fixture 8 times, while Brighton have won it 6 times. However, Brighton have won 4 of the last 5 meetings against the Red Devils, with Manchester United winning just 1, and that was last season when they beat them by 2-0 at the Amex Stadium. In the reverse fixture, Brighton beat up against Manchester United by 3-1. So clearly, if you're a Manchester United fan, you'd be pretty concerned about this particular fixture. Well, both teams are different from what they were last season, and perhaps that could shape for us a different whole game, because we had Roberto Di Zerbi on the other side, and he's no more on that side. Brighton have the youngest manager in the Premier League in Fabian Hasler on the other side of the dugout. So I just can't wait to get to see how he sets up his team against the Manchester United side that are desperate to perform this season, given the amount of pressure that is on Erik ten Hag's shoulders, not in terms of form or anything, but in terms of what he needs to deliver this season as far as rebuilding that Manchester United project goes. Nonetheless, early kickoffs are always tricky. For those of you that have followed, Premier League football for a while. They are always tricky. We did see that game between Ipswich and Liverpool over on match day 1, and it was a tricky game for Liverpool, especially in that first half. So clearly, they tend not to go so well in most cases. But what we shouldn't expect is a draw. I mean, they've never drawn. It is either you die or you're killed. I mean, they don't settle for no, singular points as far as this particular fixture goes. Speaking of matters, Manchester United, of course, they will be missing some players, the likes of Luke Shaw, who has a calf injury. Rasmus Højlund has a hamstring. Of course, we know about Lenny Yoro out for 3 months. We do know Tyler Malacia is still struggling with that knee. So, in some of the key players that they will be without for this particular fixture. But then again, also on the other side of Brighton, Fabian Haseler will be without some of his key players. The players like Solly March, players like Ivan Ferguson, players like Pavis Estupinan, players like Julio Eniso, players like Tariq Lamptey. So, I mean, both sides have their fair share of injuries, despite the fact that it's too early into the new season. Nonetheless, that won't stop them from having the available squad that is capable of hurting the other side. They all kicked off the new Premier League campaign with victories, with Manchester United beating up against Fulham, thanks to that 1-0 victory, a goal scored by Joshua Zirkzee on Friday last week, while Brighton beat up against Everton by 3-0 at Goodison Park to kick off their campaign with that impressive or emphatic victory. Kaoru Mitoma, one of those on target for that Brighton side, as well as Danny Welbeck, a former Manchester United player who will be facing his former employers, as well as Simon Adingra, who was voted the best young player of the Africa Cup of Nations 2023 that was won by Ivory Coast. So, when you look at both sides, of course, we do know that over the years, Brighton is one of those teams that likes to be dominant on the ball. They're very good at, at a counter-attack, especially when they're going through the channels, being led by Kaoru Mitoma, who missed a good chunk of last season, especially the second part of the season through injury. But very, very good player. And then, of course, Danny Welbeck, not always, but given the chance, he has no, he won't hesitate to punish his former bosses. He did that while he was still at Arsenal. For those of you that remember, I think that particular game in the FA Cup when Arsenal beat up against Manchester United by 2-1, I think the other goal had been scored by Nacho Monreal. I stand to be corrected on those particulars. But anyways, so on the side of Manchester United, they do have plenty enough in spite of those injuries. Of course, you do have your Matthias de Ligt in that centre back. You do have Lisandro Martinez. Diego Dalot is available for selection. You do have Mazraoui, the new signing. Of course, Andre Onana in that goal. Kobbie Mainoo, Bruno Fernandes, Mason Mount, Garnacho, Amadou Diallo, Marcus Rashford, and of course Joshua Zirkzee. Whoever Ten Hag chooses to field for that starting 11 should be enough to challenge Brighton for that, for all 3 points on the afternoon. But like I did say, early kickoffs are usually tricky. On the side of Brighton, but the former player in Dan Welbeck, I think Manchester United should be on the watch out for players like Kaoru Mitoma, Simon Adingra, João Pedro. These are players that are really capable of hurting you. And then, of course, they will be with the leadership of James Milner, perhaps in that midfield, as well as the captain Lewis Dunk in that backline, to command Fabian Haseler's side in their charge against Manchester United. For me, the player that I feel that Brighton will really miss this season is Pascal Gross, who they allowed to leave to join Borussia Dortmund in Germany. I do think they will really, really miss him this season. Anyways, this is a particularly hard one for me to call in terms of what my prediction is going to be. However, I'm going to be a little ambiguous and go for a 2-1 victory for Manchester United in this particular fixture. Yeah, that's what I'm going with. Can it be different? Obviously. But that is what my gut tells me. Away from the 𝐕𝐈𝐃𝐄𝐒 Stadium, let's now shift our focus to Aston Villa, who will be hosting Arsenal, a team that managed to beat Arsenal home and away last season. Arsenal last season suffered 5 throughout the campaign, and 2 of those came at the hands of Aston Villa, who kept clean sheets against the Gunners in both fixtures. The first being a 1-0 victory against the Gunners, while the reverse fixture was a 2-0 victory for Unai Emery's side. Arguably a fixture that I do think that put Arsenal off that title pursuit, despite the fact that they even took it down to the wire to the final day. So, how is it going to shape like? Arsenal have all the motivation to exert their revenge on this particular fixture, given how it transpired the last season. But one that is the 2022-2023 campaign, Arsenal did beat up against Aston Villa by 4 goals to 2 at Villa Park. If you remember, Oli Watkins, I think, and 𝐵𝐷𝐄𝐒 were on target for the home side, while �𝐔𝐄 an own goal by Emiliano Martinez, the former Arsenal goalkeeper, when he deflected that Jorginho, thunderbolt into the back of his own net. Of course, Gabriel Martinelli on target for that particular one. And then, of course, Bukayo Saka were the 4 players that were involved in those goals at Villa Park the last time Arsenal won a game at Villa Park. They will have every motivation going into this particular fixture to try and win it, but it won't come easy because Aston Villa on the other side will want to sort of also exercise their dominance in trying to show that, yes, we now know your number. We can call you anytime. And, of course, it is a case of former player on one side, former manager on one side, because Unai Emery is a former manager for this Arsenal side, while goalkeeper in Emiliano Martinez is a former Arsenal player. So clearly, there's a lot of history going on between these two. Nonetheless, I do think Aston Villa do have everything in their armor to come and beat up against this Arsenal side. Emi Martinez in that goal, Matty Cash or Lucas Digne, of course, Pau Torres in that defense. Of course, they will continue to miss Tyrone Mings, who is still, out on injury. But again, they do have quite the players to, suit them or to position them to beat up against this Arsenal side. Of course, Amadou Onana, who scored just minutes into his debut when Aston Villa were beating up against West Ham last weekend by 2 goals to 1 in that midfield. Of course, John McGinn. You do have players like 𝐵𝐷𝐄𝐒. Of course, you do have an Oli Watkins. You have a Leon Bailey. You have a Jean Duran who came off the bench to, score the winner against West Ham. All these are players that Aston Villa have that are capable of, beating up against this Arsenal side. On the other side of the Gunners, of course, we do expect David Raya will be in goal. We do expect at right back to have Ben White, while at left back, that is where we do have questions. That is the position of contention. That while 𝐿𝐶𝐄 has looked fairly good in the start of the season, that is if we are also counting preseason, the Aston Villa game could be a tricky one for him in terms of how Mikel Arteta may want to smoothen his weaknesses for his side. So something tells me that Jurriën Timber could be primed to start this particular fixture ahead of 𝐿𝐶𝐄 in that left back role. The fixture may come a little too early for Ricardo Carafiori to, make his full debut in terms of being in the starting lineup. So that one may just be available on the bench. Of course, Gabriel Magalhaes and William Saliba in that midfield of Thomas Partey, Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard. I expect that one to remain unchanged from the side that beat up against Wolverhampton Wanderers by 2 goals to 0 last weekend. Then, of course, Arsenal trying to complete the signing of Mikel Merino, but this deal may not be completed just in time for him to be registered to feature in this particular game. We don't know for sure, but we are waiting to see. And then, of course, the forward lines, Kai Havertz will continue to lead the lines. Gabriel Martinelli and Bukayo Saka are my expectations. Should anything change in that forward line, perhaps it could be a swap between Gabriel Jesus and Gabriel Martinelli. But it's one I do not expect to see. Of course, the battle will be up there. Thomas Partey versus Amadou Onana. Remember, Arsenal held interest in Amadou Onana before he joined Aston Villa from Everton during just this summer. And then, of course, John McGinn, I think, scored that only goal that won them this particular fixture in the first leg. So in that midfield, there's going to be a lot of contention. And for everything that Arsenal need to do right, Martin Odegaard has to be at the top of his game. Bukayo Saka has to be sharp and all those things. So what is my prediction for this particular fixture? Again, another hard one to call, but I think I'll stick with the victory for the Arsenal. That extra motivation, that desire for revenge, as much as it may leave them a little bit vulnerable, I think it is what will be their motivating factor to go ahead and collect all 3 points from Aston Villa. But a draw is also highly plausible. And then, moving away from that fixture, let's revisit in brief, of course, Tottenham Hotspurs versus Everton. Back in the days, this used to be a big fixture as far as mid-table teams were concerned. When David Moyes was still the manager at Everton, while Harry Redknapp was, I think, the boss at Tottenham at the time, or during those spells. For those of you that remember the days of Michael Carrick before he joined Manchester United, for those of you that remember Robbie Keane, for those of you that remember Ledley King, Pavlyuchenko, Rafael van der Vaart during that spell, of course, the rise of Gareth Bale, those are the days we are looking back at. Yunus Kabul, I mean, that's the side we're talking about. And then, of course, Everton on the other side, at the time, they had the likes of Mikel Arteta, Tim Cahill, this defender in Phil Jagielka, that backline, Tim Howard, those kinds of players. So it used to be a big fixture. But in recent times, over the last 2 seasons, we've seen Everton literally fight for their lives to avoid a relegation. Last season, they were embroidered in that trouble of being found in breach of the profit and sustainability rules that cost them, points that were docked off them. And then Tottenham on the other side were a very brilliant team, especially in the first half of the season. They did struggle a bit in the second half of the season, and that's how they missed out on a top 4 finish. But they remain a very bogey side for any team. Of course, their goalkeeper in Vicario in goal, very, very good goalkeeper. He did make a very brilliant save this week on Monday as Tottenham shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw against Leicester City. Of course, you'll have Pedro Porro in that left back position, Destin Udogie in that right back wall, Mickey van de Ven and Christian Romero, the players who made the most passes in match day 1 up to 96 passes apiece, will be in that back line. Very, very decent duo. And then, of course, you have that midfield. It had Rodrigo Bentancur, and then I think James Maddison in there. Of course, for me, I prefer Yves Bissouma and Pepe Matza, so this should be available for selection for this particular fixture. Yves Bissouma, I think, was being penalized by the club for, having seen, inhaling laughing gas prior to that particular fixture. And then, of course, you have James Maddison in there. You have Son Heung-min, Solanke will be absent, but then you have Brennan Johnson in there, all decent players that could offer Tottenham Hotspurs the edge over this Everton side that lost their opening fixture against Brighton in that 3-0 defeat. On the side of Everton, they've managed to keep a hold of Gerard Braithwaite, one of their best centre-backs, but of course they did lose Amadou Onana to Aston Villa, and then Jordan Pickford will still be in that goal. Abdoulaye Diakore will, be there. Then you do have James McNeil, you do have Dominic Calvert-Lewin. These are decent players. Ashley Young did suffer a red card in that particular fixture, so we do not expect to see him. Captain Seamus Coleman could feature in that particular fixture. Myakalenko. These are in the whole setup of this Everton side. They are capable of going to the London Stadium and collect a point. It could be a big ask if you told them to go and collect all 3 points, but anything is possible in the Premier League. But unfortunately, I do not think this is the fixture that they will be doing it in. So I'm going with a Spurs victory, perhaps a 2-0 or a 2-1 for this particular fixture. And then I do think in the other fixture, Manchester City versus Ipswich, I do think it will be a routine victory for Manchester City against the newcomers. Fulham, Leicester, that one could end in a draw, just as much as I have the same feeling for that Southampton versus Nottingham Forest fixture. And then on Super Sunday, of course, Wolves against Chelsea. Wolves didn't look too bad against Arsenal, but and overall, when you put things into context, for the sake of Chelsea, they weren't their worst against, a Man City side, against the defending champions. So it could be another key fixture to really look out forward to this particular weekend. Otherwise, as far as previewing some of these game scores, allow me to leave it at that. For now, if we do get ample time, we could look maybe a little in depth on that Chelsea fixture and that of Liverpool for Super Sunday. But should time fail us, no pun intended. Otherwise, stay blessed. Do not forget to like, comment, and share. And see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend.